What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Today's video, I'm going to be starting a two-part series where I explain to you the entire Fortnite storyline in its fullest, including details you most likely weren't even aware of. In this first part, I will be explaining all of Chapter 1. If you are new, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. And if you want to support me in the Fortnite item shop, use code iLegend _ ad. Let's get straight into the video. What's up guys, today I'm going to be explaining all of Chapter 1 of Fortnite. In the next storyline part 2 video, I'll be explaining all of Chapter 2. I'm going to be getting really into depth on detail, and a lot of this stuff a lot of people didn't even know because it was so low-key that not everyone knew. If you're ready to know the Fortnite's Chapter 1 storyline in full depth detail, smash that like button and let's get straight into it. Before we can get into the storyline itself, you need to understand the Multiverse Theory. The Multiverse Theory is the theory that there are other Earths existing at the same time as ours, but are invisible to us. These other Earths are other realities, and the amount of other realities there are infinite. To give an example, on our Earth, we are the way we are, but on another Earth, everyone on that Earth could be evil, including the doppelganger of yourself on that alternate Earth. Now that you have a somewhat understanding of the multiverse, let's apply it to Fortnite. In Fortnite, the thing that allows people to travel between realities in the multiverse is the 0 point. The physical form of the 0 point is on the Fortnite island, making the Chapter 1 island the bridge between all the realities of the multiverse. To clarify this better, in creative, there's the creative hub that leads to all the different creative maps. The Fortnite island is the hub to all the realities. All the realities are connected to the Fortnite island through the 0 point. To continue, people of another reality discovered the powers of the 0 point and started studying it. After they realized the true potential of the 0 point, the people studying the 0 point formed an organization called the Imagined Order, or simply known as IO. You may recognize the name IO from the IO guards on the Fortnite island currently in Chapter 2. After more studies, they were able to instruct a bridge through the 0 point from their reality to other realities. The bridge was powered by dark matter, as you can see in this image. You probably recognize this purple texture from something else, but I'll get into that in a bit. IO hired some special agents to assist in their experimentation of the 0 point. One of the agents hired was the agent we know as John Jones, or also known as Agent Jones. One of his first missions was to cross the bridge into the 0 point and see what happens when he jumps into it. He jumped into it, found the Fortnite island, and came back to report his findings to IO. But traveling to the center of all realities had its side effects. The result of someone entering and exiting the Fortnite island is called snapshots. This information is very important, so pay attention. When Agent Jones came back from the island, he was just fine and nothing changed, but he left a snapshot on the island. A snapshot is a duplicate of the person who entered and left the island. Let's call the snapshot of Agent Jones Jonesy. Every time someone enters the reality of the Fortnite island that is not initially from there, an exact duplicate of that person is created. IO kept sending different agents to the island. The snapshots of the agents sent were the original inhabitants of the island, or as we know them, the original default skins. Originally, IO didn't notice anything wrong, but as they kept sending agents, they started to notice many clones of the agents running around the island. The agents reported this back to IO, which led to IO's discovery of sending agents to the island caused snapshot duplicates to be made of the agents. IO quickly decided to cover this information up because this could be wrong, and if this information were to get out to the people of their reality, IO would risk investigation and shutdown. IO also decided that they needed to guard the 0 point to make sure none of the new inhabitants of the island would escape the island. The two reasons for this was one, if the people escaped and broke the news of what IO was doing, IO would be shut down, and two, they had no idea what would happen if a snapshot escaped to the reality of the person they were cloned of. Since the island is a bridge between realities, it is fine that there are multiple duplicates of the same person on the island, but if there were multiple of the same person in a single universe, it could cause a collapse to the fabric of reality of that universe. Because IO didn't want to risk this, they made it their top priority to keep the snapshots from leaving the island through the 0 point. To do this, IO created a military unit called the Enforcers, who were trained to deal with breaches in realities over the multiverse. But on the island, it seemed that the snapshots had no intention of escaping and that they don't know the truth of the world they are in. The cause of this is the loop. Here's what we know about the loop. The Fortnite island is stuck in the loop, and if you are in the loop long enough, you start to lose your memories, of where you came from in the multiverse and become a whole new person. What causes the loop is unknown, but we do know that the storm of dark matter around the island has something to do with resetting the loop. We will be getting more into that in the Chapter 2 Part 2 video. All the snapshots over time lost their memories and took on different identities and new personalities, seeing each other as different people when a lot of them were doppelgangers of one another. This is why so many people on the island look exactly the same, but have their own individual new personalities and memories, making them to one another different people, giving us the many different skins we have in Fortnite. For example, the Jonesy default skin, Skull Trooper, and Mary Marauder are all 3 snapshots of Agent Jones, but to each other, they see themselves as different people. These snapshots forgot that they are duplicate agents of another reality, forgetting about the 0 point, Io, and where they came from. All the snapshots started to make a life for themselves and believed that they always lived there with everyone else. They started to build homes, farms, and as time went on, cities. While all this was happening, Io was still sending agents secretly to the island to continue their studies. So life seemed to be going really well for the people of the island until they noticed something in the sky. It was a meteor, and the path the meteor was taking was straight towards the island. Every day they noticed the meteor becoming bigger and bigger in the night sky. Eventually, some people started receiving strange messages in Morse code sent from the meteor. The Morse code said SOS, and they don't want us to know. So clearly, the meteor had more to it than it seemed. Eventually, the meteor crashed down on the island, taking out a place the people of the island built called Dusty Depot. Investigation of the meteor found that it was more than just a meteor. The first thing discovered was that there were crystals with anti-gravity propulsion properties within the meteor. The other thing found was that within the center of the meteor, there was a pod, perfectly sized for a person, meaning the meteor was carrying a passenger. After this pod was discovered, the government of the island quickly built a research facility around the pod so they could study it. They wanted to contain the person in the pod if the passenger were to escape. Their preparations were for nothing because the person inside the pod was able to escape. His name was the Visitor. As a lot of us already know, the Visitor is a part of a group called the Seven. The Seven are a mysterious organization. While the motives of the Seven are unknown, it seems that their goals are the opposite of Io's. Io wanted to keep the people of the island from leaving it through the 0 point, basically trapping them in the loop. The Seven want to free the people of the island by destabilizing the 0 point, even though it could risk causing the collapse of other realities. It is up to your own opinion to see which side is truly the bad guys, but in the end, the two organizations are fighting one another. After the Visitor escaped, he found a place to lay low where he wouldn't be found. He starts to form a plan to cause destabilization to the loop so the people of the island can realize they can escape it. Using the crystals from the meteor, he goes to an old film set where the fake rocket had been built for a movie. Using the anti-gravity propulsion crystals and his own knowledge, he converted the fake rocket into a fully operational one. The government realized what he was building, but they didn't attack or confront him in fear that the Visitor would launch it. So the government sent out warnings to the people of the island, telling them to take shelter just in case the rocket is a missile that the Visitor could use to blow up a part of the island. The day finally came where the Visitor launched the rocket. The rocket boosted up high into the sky, then flipped and started to dive towards the island. As it is doing this, we hear the Visitor say 0 point oscillator on, and the computer responds by setting the coordinates. The Visitor then says engaging quantum hole accelerator. Then 4 red beams start to point down to the center of tilted towers. The rocket boosters go to max power and boost straight towards Tilted at high speeds. But right before the rocket would have hit the city, the rocket disappeared through a crack in the sky. We then see the rocket emerge from another crack and fly around some more before entering another crack. The rocket emerges from a crack one more time above Loot Lake and flies straight up into the sky, forming an even bigger crack in the sky that remained permanently there, unlike the previous small cracks that disappeared shortly after the rocket emerged from them. But what was the effect of what the rocket did? As we know, the 0 point allows travel between all the realities of the multiverse. It is the bridge between space-time. If we refer back to what the Visitor said during the launch, we can see that he turned on something called a 0 point oscillator. So from what we got from this, it seems the Visitor built a smaller but weaker version of the 0 point within the rocket, and in using this, he was able to create cracks in space-time, aka rifts. Eventually, from a final push, he formed a bigger, more permanent rift in the sky that would destabilize the loop. This part of the Visitor's plan was a success, and he laid low on the island once again. Meanwhile, the giant crack in the sky started to mess with the reality of the island. Things on the island began to disappear, and things from other realities began to appear on the island. The crack in the sky wasn't like an alternate, less powerful 0 point, but allowing things to travel between the realities of the multiverse to the island, and it was uncontrollable, so these events would happen at random times. For example, the giant Durr Burger head from the Durr Burger restaurant was transported from the island to the middle of the California desert in our reality. No one knew why something from a video game would randomly be in the middle of the desert, so a private investigation was started. No results came from the investigation, so the burger was abandoned abandoned. Later, a trespasser decided to go see the burger for himself. He was a street artist who called himself Drift. He sneaked onto the property that the burger was at and decided to vandalize it with graffiti. As he was vandalizing the burger, the rift that brought the Durr burger to the desert started to act up again, and not just took the Durr burger back to Fortnite, but Drift along with it. Drift found himself in a whole new reality that he was unfamiliar to. When he was teleported to Fortnite, it seemed that a portion of the desert came too, because the bottom right corner of the island was turned into a desert. A Viking village of another reality was teleported to the top of one of the mountains on the island as well. Drift was confused at first on what had happened to him, but a group of people of the island found him and became his friends. As Drift spent more time on the island within the loop, he lost his memories of his past life of the universe he came from. Meanwhile, Io is freaking out because this time it wasn't a snapshot that had entered the loop, it was a real person. Afraid that the items and people randomly arriving from other realities would cause disaster, Io sent in the enforcers to capture Drift and bring him back to his reality. Drift was able to fight back and hide from the enforcers, same as the Vikings, because they learned how to use guns and are good in battle. Meanwhile, the crack in the sky left by the visitor was still there, but unlike the 0 point, it was unstable. The crack had remained in the sky for over a month, but was beginning to shrink and close. When it was at its smallest, it released a purple lightning strike toward a section of the new desert on the island. The lightning formed a giant purple cube. The cube had the same color and texture as the dark matter used by the Imagine Order to make a bridge through the 0 point. The cube is a cube of dark matter. A theory I found online is that rifts and dark matter are byproducts of each other. You need dark matter to create a rift, and rifts can bring dark matter into physical reality. Once the cube had entered the island, it started to travel its way to the one single source of interdimensional power on the island, the 0 point. As a lot of you know, the 0 point was located under Loot Lake. When the cube arrived at Loot Lake, it rolled and started spreading its essence across the lake, making the lake into a pool of dark matter. It stayed in this form as it gained more power until it reformed back into a cube, lifting the island in the middle of the lake into the sky. The floating island left a hole below in its place that led to somewhere unknown. No one was able to go into the hole to see what was down there. The cube carried island started to travel across the map, leaving ruins on the ground in certain areas that would act as power enhancers when the time called for their use. Cube Island finally returned back to above Loot Lake after having made multiple ruins around the island. With its new power, the cube let out a blast of energy that broke apart the floating island. So obviously everyone on the island was aware that this was going on. The people of the island very invested in what was going on with the cube, but the cube also brought in the attention of people from far away within the reality the island was on. A mysterious robot called AIM parachuted down to the island and observed the occurring events happening on the island. AIM was obviously there as a scout, someone higher, but we will get into that in a bit. Back to the cube started dropping its essence into the mysterious hole, with which most likely led to the 0 point. Eventually, the cube started to spin, unleashed a big burst of energy that transported everyone on the island to the in-between. The in-between is the true center of the multiverse, where time and space are malleable. The only way to get to the in-between is through the 0 point on the island. This next part is a little iffy. Everyone on the island is floating in the in-between, and this butterfly flies over to every individual person in the in-between. All the people touch the butterfly, and a rift teleports everyone back to the island. While only seconds had passed for the people of the island, it seemed as if it just days or even weeks had passed on the island. Previously disturbed Loot Lake was now peaceful and was recovered from the aftermath of the cube. For now, the island was at peace, but this peace did not last long. A winter cloud had appeared far on the horizon, and it seemed to be getting closer and closer by the day. Now we need to talk about another part of the story so you can understand the next things we will be talking about. The Fortnite Island is not the only thing within the reality that bridges all the realities. The island exists on a planet with other continents and land masses. Time to go over some brief history of the planet the island exists on. Thousands of years in the past, somewhere else on the planet, there was a group of elemental kingdoms. Eventually, there was a war between the different elemental kingdoms where the Fire Kingdom fought against the other kingdoms. Fire Kingdom was able to conquer all the other kingdoms except for the Ice Kingdom. The Ice King was a mastermind and was able to capture the Fire King and chained him up in the dungeon of his castle. The Ice King knew the Fire King would eventually be able to melt his way out of captivity and escape, so the Ice King sacrificed himself and covered his kingdom completely in a deep freeze of ice so cold that the Fire King would never be able to escape. Doing this meant the Ice King had to freeze himself as well. This caused the Fire and Ice King to both fall into an eternal slumber. Fast forward many thousands of years, the Ice Kingdom was still covered in the Ice King's deep freeze, and only the toughest of people were able to survive it. One of these people was Sergeant Winter. He was a great inventor and soldier, created the Stormwing planes and the AIM robots. When the cube was created, he noticed the powerful energy coming from the island and decided to travel to it and harness the power. He was the person who sent the AIM robot to scout out the island that we previously talked about. Once he realized the infinite amount of power the island had in store, he broke off the Ice Kingdom from the continent it resided to, and the Ice Kingdom floated across the ocean towards the island. Eventually, they reached the island and started to invade. Unknowingly, Sergeant Winter had set into course some very bad upcoming events. He was unaware that the ruins of the Ice King's castle was within the ice landmass he broke off. When Sergeant Winter brought the castle from a cold climate to a warmer climate, the ice of the landmass started to melt. The Ice King eventually unfroze and woke from his eternal slumber and realized that somehow the ice was melting. At this point, he was unaware that the castle had traveled across the ocean away from the icy climate they came from. He knew that if the ice kept melting, the Fire King would be unleashed. This was happening at the same time as the Ice King waking up, because as the dungeon started to melt, the Fire King started to be able to use his powers. The Ice King, desperate to keep the Fire King from escaping, used his powers to completely cover the island in snow. But the Ice King's attempt were for nothing because the Fire King was still able to escape. Fire King made his way to Wailing Woods, where he began to grow in his power once again. He started to bring up the magma from deep under the island, which caused many earthquakes to occur on the island. Eventually, he was able to successfully bring the magma to the surface, causing a volcano to form where Wailing Woods once stood. The heat that came from the volcano melted the snow that the Ice King covered the map with, only leaving the icy region from when the castle arrived to the island from melting. The new volcano also caused the surrounding area to become a jungle. The people of the island started to believe there was something really important at the volcano, especially at Loot Lake. This led the people of the island to start an excavation of the center of Loot Lake, and what they found was incredible. They found a giant metal vault, but had no idea of how to open it. The vault had started to summon keys from different parts of the island. Each key displayed a rune which identified where it needed to be placed in the vault. Eventually, all the keys were inserted into the vault and the vault opened. People jumped into the vault and they found something very weird. They found weapons and items that had somehow disappeared from their reality within the vault. But more importantly, they all saw the 0 point for the first time with their own eyes. In front of the 0 point was a desk with a helmet on it. No one was there to occupy the desk. The person that usually is there must have stepped away briefly, but of course they stepped away as people entered the vault. The people in the vault took the drum gun out of the vault, but when they left the vault, something bad happened. At the same time the vault was opened, the Fire King made the volcano erupt, causing the destruction of Tilted Towers and Retail Row. Polar Peak was also impacted by a chunk of the explosion, but the impact of Polar Peak was on the side of the iceberg and not the castle. It may seem like the Fire King failed to destroy Polar Peak, but later we will find that that assumption was wrong. So the person who sits at the desk in the vault came back and found out that when she had stepped away, the island had evolved into chaos. The person was an IO agent named Singularity. She was a high-ranking agent that was in charge of maintaining the 0 point. When she realized that the island had been dealt destruction from the volcano, she decided to help the people of the island and let them use the power of the 0 point to rebuild. With her help, the island was restored to its peace and received many technological advances. Tilted Towers was rebuilt into a futuristic city, along with Retail Row receiving a similar rebuild into a futuristic mall. Power plant was connected to the 0 point, bringing an infinite supply of power for the people of the island. Fast wind tunnel travel was opened publicly, free of charge to travel around the map, and floating observation bases were also built. A statue of Singularity was built in the middle of Neo Tilted to show the people's gratitude for her help in rebuilding. The newly found peace would not last long because the effects of the impact on Polar Peak caused the cracking and breaking down of the iceberg, revealing a giant eye belonging to a huge monster frozen in the iceberg. Fire King had awakened a powerful beast of his past from thousands of years ago. The monster eventually broke out of the iceberg, carrying Polar Peak on its back, and went into the ocean. The monster was not done with the island because it was spotted circling the island with Polar Peak on its back. The people needed a way to fight back against the monster, so the people, with the help of Singularity, built a giant mech to fight back against the monster for when the time came to fight back. The construction of the mech was done within the now dormant volcano. Around a month, the mech was completed, and Singularity was to be the one to pilot the mech. The monster, also known as the Caddis monster, finally decided to attack, blasting a green energy beam from its mouth. The monster was attracted to the power of the 0 point and started to go for the vault so it could consume its power. Singularity entered the mech mech and walked out of the volcano to fight the monster. The mech eventually carried the monster out to sea and walked back onto land, but the monster jumped right back out of the water and back into the battle, ripping off one of the arms of the mech. In desperate attempt to defeat the monster, Singularity punched the remaining arm of the mech into the vault and pulled out the 0 point. Cracking the 0 point, the arm of the mech was filled with a mass amount of energy. Singularity dropped the 0 point back down on top of the vault and punched a fatal blow on the monster. In a final action to defeat the monster, Singularity reached down and grabbed a statue of herself and lifted it, revealing the underneath of the statue to be a sword and the statue to be the hilt. In a final blow, the mech drove the sword into the monster, defeating the monster for good. With a job well done, Singularity piloted the mech into the sky and out of sight. The danger of the monster was now gone, but Singularity did something really weird. During the fight, she cracked the 0 point with the mech, destabilizing it, and after the fight, she just left into the sky without doing anything to recontain the 0 point. For someone a part of an organization that wants to keep the island's reality stable and the 0 point secret, this seemed to go against everything she supposedly stood for. Eventually, the 0 point became so unstable that it released a burst of energy, causing the reality of the island to become out of whack and disturbed. It started to bring in random items and people from alternate realities. Dusty Divot was transformed back into Dusty Depot at the moment before it was impacted by the meteor, with the meteor frozen in the sky above the old factories. Alternate versions of people on the island were brought onto the island too, such as Catalyst, the female counterpart to Drift. Tons of locations from other realities were also brought to the island. These realities included Pandora from Borderlands and a version old Retail Row that was in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. At this point, IO didn't even try to step in. They knew that the situation was so bad that none of their forces could do anything to contain it. But IO had been studying the fabric of reality on the island, so they had an idea of how they could manipulate it. They continued to study it to see if they could stabilize reality on their end. As the island continued to destabilize, a mysterious figure appeared. Another member of the Seven named the Scientist. The Scientist was in a pod like the Visitor, but since the meteor didn't crash, he was able to leave the pod unharmed and by himself. The Scientist seemed to be an alternate universe version of the Visitor. He eventually met up with the actual Visitor, who was already on the island. Another member of the Seven appeared as well. Her name was Paradigm. She seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Her suit also seemed very similar to Singularity's. This is because Singularity was actually a member of the Seven. She had infiltrated IO and climbed up the ranks so she could be in the position to further the plans of the Seven. This is why she launched into the sky at the end of her fight with the Caddis monster. She had left the 0 point exposed, which was essential to the plans of the Seven. So now the Visitor, Scientist, and Paradigm are all started to work together to hatch their master plan of allowing the players of the island to escape the loop. At Dusty Depot, they built a rocket. When the building of the rocket was finished, they launched it. When it launched, it immediately rifted into the sky and into the in-between. Using the reality-bending properties of the in-between, they duplicated the rocket into 7 rockets. Using the 7 rockets, they broke the time freeze around the meteor and brought the meteor through the rift. Then high in the sky, directly above the 0 point, a rift opened. One of the rockets dived down and flew straight into the 0 point, causing a big pulse that launched everyone into the air. And then guided by the other 6 rockets, the meteor was brought down to the 0 point. The meteor crashed into the aura, the 0 point, and broke through, going straight into the 0 point and collapsing it. A black hole was formed and it sucked in the planet, the island, and everyone on it. The Seven intended for this to be a way for the people of the island to escape the loop. Once the black hole was successfully created, the Seven started sending coded messages to each other, celebrating their supposed victory. But the imagined order still had a few tricks up their sleeves that the Seven did not guess would happen. IO's studies of the island were successful because they used what was left of the 0 point's power to rearrange the matters within the black hole to form a new planet and new island. Seven realized they had been foiled and went back into hiding. Well, guys, that is the end of part 1 of the Fortnite storyline. In the next storyline video, I'll be explaining the events after the black hole happening and to where we are currently at in Fortnite right now. But other than that, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, drop a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you never miss an upload, and use code iLegend_ in the Fortnite item shop. #ad. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.